Chapter 101, Mother-in-Law Mentality. Suddenly hearing the news, Jiang Xuning was unable to digest it for a while. After a long pause, she muttered in a dreamy tone, "What's going on?" Yu Fengyan then told the cause and effect. The whole thing is actually not complicated at all. After listening to Jiang Xuning's analysis of her situation at home last time, Yu Fengyan couldn't help but meditate on what could be done to get out of Bafu safely. After escaping, she may be caught back, and the end will be even worse. She does not have such the ability to be an independent household, let alone a female household. When she thinks about it, she naturally thinks of the word marry. Wouldn't it be justifiable to find someone to marry? But who will marry him? Furthermore, the rule has always been follow the father at home, marry the husband, and die from the son. If the situation after marriage is the same as at home, or even worse than at home, wouldn't that be a waste of effort? So, if the person who married her is good enough, or cooperative enough, it would be the best. That night, Yu Fengyan wrote down the names and surnames of all the men she knew on a piece of paper, thinking about them one by one, even including Wang An, the boss of the Bafu gatekeeper family. Yet none of them can be. In the end, there was only one name left on the paper that was not crossed out, and that is, Ren Weizi. Looking at this name, Yu Fengyan's eyes became brighter and brighter, and after making some ideas in her mind, she found that with her limited contacts, there was no more suitable person than this. First, Ren Weizi is short of money and has a request for her. Second, living far away in Shuzhong, after marrying, you can stay away from the site of Bafu. Third, her sister Yu is also trying to become a cadre of Xian Farm. Fourth, Ren Weizi is like a good person. She had never known that she had no brilliant brain, so she could only write down all the reasons she could think of in this extremely clumsy way, and then press the page on the paper on her heart, and could not sleep with her eyes open all night. Because, she gave birth to an unprecedented and bold plan in her heart. As long as you can leave Bafu, it is a good thing, and as long as you can do things for the second girl, it is a good thing. What kind of female precept and family precept, the world discusses, where can it be taken care of? So, on the day when he talked to Ren Weizi about the salt farm business, Yu Fengyan also talked to him about a lifelong business. Jiang Xuning still hasn't eased up a little until now. What is Ren Weizi's reaction? Yu Fengyan's cheeks were a little red, she didn't seem to be embarrassed, and her voice lowered. It seems that I have been stunned for a long time, and I don't dare to believe it. But after all, I have the money you gave me from the girl, and he has to recognize the money if he doesn't recognize people. So after walking around the house several times, he still sat down and asked me why. So I told him everything. When she said this, she remembered something, and suddenly quickly waved her hand. But I haven't said a word about you, girl, and he doesn't know yet. When I finally left, he told me that he wanted to fake a marriage, which was also a lifelong event, and he didn't dare to play with me, let alone recklessly agreed to me. So he asked me to put this matter aside for a few days. First, he needed to calm down and think about it, and second, he also hoped that I would think carefully after I went back, and if I didn't regret it after a few days, he would dare to say whether he would agree or not. Sounds like this, Ren Weizi is a gentleman. Jiang Xuning also knew that if she married such a stupid girl, she would have a chance to come back to life, and Fengyan was not bad looking, and her temperament was good. Although she was in a bad situation in Bafu, she could be regarded as a concubine of an official family in terms of background, and she was more than enough to match him as a businessman. Think about it, there is no pressure to say yes. But this person also tried his best to persuade Yu Fengyan to go back and think about it again, which is not bad. Just thinking like this, she had never heard of such a thing after all, and the worry in her heart overweighed the others, and she asked, "Now he agrees?" Yu Fengyan nodded, agreed. She also added, he has no parents at home, and everything is up to him. I have already agreed with me, after marriage, they will be a nominal husband and wife, do not dare to offend, and do not have to force it for half a year, after settling down in Shuzhong, as long as I mention it, I can reconcile, if I can't settle down for a while, I will live in his house first, and then talk about it when I settle down. I have already established a letter with him, and it depends on when I will propose marriage. Yu Fengyan is just an unfavored concubine in Bafu, but I am afraid that no one in the family will spend more time on her family affairs. She knows a little about what is going on in the Bafu. And Yu is also counting on making money from Ren Weizi, and she will probably ask for something through this family affair, so it doesn't matter, just give it to her, and things are not difficult to do. Zhang Xuning was speechless for a long time. She couldn't help but look at the wooden, timid, and even clumsy girl in front of her with a silent and amazed gaze, and suddenly remembered two words, great wisdom and foolishness, inner beauty in the heart. But after thinking about it, if Yu Fengyan is indeed a smart person who cares about gains and losses and looks forward to the future, I am afraid that it is impossible to make such a bold decision in his life. The more tenacious a person is, the easier it is to do extraordinary things. When she came today, she originally wanted to ask Ren Weizi how things were going, but she was blown up by this news, so that when Yu Fengyan talked to her about business, she felt a little in a trance. 10,000 taels of dry shares have become. Ren Weizi has also promised that this dry stock can be transferred to others. And Yu Fengyan's sister Yu also invested as much as 2,000 taels. Things are going extremely well, the bureau has been laid out, and it is only necessary to follow up. Seeing that it was not too early, Zhang Xuning and Yu Fengyan sat for a while, thinking that there was actually a lot to say, but they didn't know how to speak, so they said, I just came out of the palace today, the palace is in chaos, and I don't need to go into the palace to accompany me for the next period of time, I only listen to the edict in the house, but there is more time to talk, and I will come to see you later. Yu Fengyan got up to see her off. Zhou Yunzi also waited at the door, and sent her out of the door when he took her out of the cell. The carriage was still waiting outside. When the coachman saw her, he asked, Girl, are you going back to your house? Zhang Xuning nodded subconsciously, but after sitting in the car, her brows furrowed tightly, no matter what, she felt uneasy, the more she thought about it, the more she felt that this thing sounded unreliable like the Arabian Nights. No, I haven't even met this Ren Weizi, what if it's a liar? A vertical mark twisted out of her eyebrows, thinking that Yu Fengyan this girl was stupid, and after thinking for a long time, seeing that the carriage was about to turn on the road back to the house, she suddenly lifted the curtain and said, Don't go back to the house first, go to the Shuxiang Inn. She should have avoided getting involved in it as much as possible. After all, there are hidden dangers left by the previous raw silk business, and I don't know who is watching behind it, so it will be very dangerous to rashly get involved and expose yourself. But I can't care so much about it now. This is Ren Weizi, she has to see it. The coachman was naturally a little surprised, but he also knew that Zhang Xuning was a domineering temper in the house, although he muttered in his heart that it was almost late this day, and if he didn't return to the house, he was afraid of worrying his family, but he didn't dare to say it, so he simply shook the whip, urging the horses pulling the cart to travel faster. After a while, I arrived at the Shuxiang Inn. Zhang Xuning got out of the car and walked inside, directly asking to see Ren Weizi by name. It's still the upstairs room. Ren Weizi saw Zhang Xuning for the first time, and he was really taken aback. After opening the door to welcome her in, the whole person was a little surprised, seeing that she was not dressed like a businessman, so she was very confused, and couldn't help asking, I don't know what happened to the girl. Zhang Xuning frowned and didn't speak. She stared at Ren Weizi up and down 3 times, her frowning brows didn't let go, She didn't even answer his questions. She stepped forward, walked around him, walked from left to right, and looked from right to left. Renwiazi suddenly felt like pork on the shelf. And the girl in front of her, how does she look like those mean and picky guests? Anyone who is looked at like this will be uncomfortable. Renwiazi is the same. There is a chill on his back, coughed, and asked carefully again, "Girl." Jiang Swining's footsteps stopped. It looks like Renwiazi also has some bearing, and his facial features are good, but he is more like a scholar, but not like a businessman. It's no wonder that the salt pan at home will fall. But people seem to be okay, but why wouldn't she be so happy? This man actually wants to marry Fang Yin. Jiang Swining confirmed, "You are Renwiazi." Renwiazi was still a little confused. "Yes." Jiang Swining's eyes revealed a bit harshness and scrutiny. "You made a contract with Fang Yin to marry her." Renwiazi finally came back to his senses. It turned out that he was here for this matter. "But miss, you didn't seem to mention who had a good relationship with her in Bafa before, and the girl in front of her might be a relative from her mother's side." No wonder he looked at him like a mother-in-law who looked at her husband for her own daughter. The smile on his lips stiffened, and sweat broke down on his forehead. At this time, he was a little embarrassed, and said, "Yes." Jiang Swining paused and didn't speak for a while. God knows what thoughts are going through her mind. This Renwiazi is an unlucky ghost. Not long after taking the money back to Zhou, he encountered twists and turns. The salt field was burned clean in an accident. This person was finally forced into a corner by fate, desperate and hanged, and became a hanged ghost. In this life, Jiang Swining invested money in him. If you can indirectly mention a little bit through Yu Fangyin, he will naturally mention a little. After all, he also has money in it. But this kind of thing is far away from the Emperor of the Sky, and the whip is out of reach. How to do things in Shuzhong, it is impossible for her to control it, and it is really not unusual for something to happen later. She feels that she has been reminded, and the rest depends on God, and she has not thought about what it must be. But Fang Yin, this stupid girl, is going to fake marriage with a slap on her head. What if things haven't changed like the previous life, and this Renwiazi runs to hang himself again? Won't her family Fang Yin become a widow and have to be widowed? And so on. Widow. A thought suddenly crossed Jiang Swining's head, and she raised her eyes to look at Renwiazi's gaze and suddenly became a little strange. If this unlucky ghost in front of him really hanged himself, at least the salt field will be left to his widow in the future. Ahem, just thinking about it, of course. Just thinking about it? Jiang Swining's attitude suddenly became kinder, and she also had an unprecedentedly gentle smile on her face, and she raised her hand to Renwiazi very politely and asked him to sit down. "Ren Gongzi, let's sit down and talk."
星号
Xie Mansion, Qin Hall. Xie Wei came back from the palace ahead of schedule today, but he neither read a book to deal with official business, nor did he chop the piano and tune the strings, but lowered his eyes and personally cleaned up the tea table carved from the roots of the tree trunk little by little. There are no distractions, and it is very calm. The water used to make the tea was also boiled on the stove long ago, and the hot air was spraying out. It looks like you're waiting for someone. After he cleaned up the tea table, the sound of footsteps outside also came, and the sword book led a person to approach, and said outside the door, "Sir, Mr. Gongai has arrived."